I'd like to acknowledge the local custodians of the land in which we're meeting on this afternoon and honour elders past, present and emerging. I'm on Darkinjung land at the beautiful Avoca Beach. Welcome everybody. Really popular session today on accreditation and really lovely to have you all with us. I'm Melissa Wilkinson from the education team at the PHN and I sit on the Central Coast. Have a bit of housekeeping. We will have a poll at the end of this session. I strongly encourage you to please complete that. That's the way we get our feedback for data for future events. We are also being recorded and it will be available on our website in the coming days, along with any resources and handouts which will be discussed as well in the session. Please use the question box. This is your time to ask those questions and we will have an opportunity, time allowing, at the end of the session to get to those as well. And any that we don't get to, I will forward on to the presenters on your behalf for you as well. Today we are really lovely to have Renee Wood, PCIO from the PHN with us, and Michelle McDonald from QPA. I'm going to hand over now to Michelle to commence us off. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Melissa. My name's Michelle McDonald. I'm the Program Manager at Quality Practice Accreditation. So some of you may have encountered me over your accreditation journey, but today I'd love to welcome you for our Engaging Your Team for a Successful Accreditation Journey session. Just quickly, I am currently situated on Wiradjuri land and support Melissa's acknowledgement of country, but would also like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri peoples. Today we are going to talk about, in the context of having a successful accreditation journey, we're going to talk about what does success look like for you. We'll talk about some team building within the accreditation journey, how and who you should engage within your practice, and the coordination and implementation of your accreditation journey. We do have some resources and obviously we'll have some time for questions. When we think about accreditation, we don't think of it as an overall exciting process, but the work of your team and not an individual in your team is really what the accreditation journey is all about. It can be a highly motivating and team building exercise for all members within your practice team. Developing your practice policies and procedures to achieve high quality, patient-centered care is reliant on management. The common shortfall in preparing for accreditation can be the levels of active involvement from your team in developing those practice processes and then adhering to them and maintaining them. Commonly, the build-up to accreditation falls on the shoulders of a practice manager or leaders within the clinical team. When a practice allows staff to provide input and exercise control in their scope of work, it can make a difference to the functionality of a practice in achieving compliance against the standards. Engaging your peers from both clinical and non-clinical sectors of your practice can assist you in keeping your staff engaged, connected, and valued throughout this journey. When you appropriately engage your staff to have active involvement in decision-making and training in your journey towards achieving accreditation, you not only empower your staff with the information they need to grow in their own role, but you also minimize that negativity, the burnout, the disengagement from all staff who contribute to the accreditation pathway. So let's quickly talk about defining success. So we're talking about a success in the accreditation journey primarily. So the biggest question for you in your practice is, what does success look like for you? It can look like many different things for different practices, for different members of the practice team, for different locations. You really have to think about defining success for you. So what does that look like? What do you want to get out of accreditation? The best way to have a common goal or a common understanding about success in the accreditation journey is to actually ask every member of your team. So we've got accreditation coming up. What do you think? What do you think would make it successful for you in our practice when we go through this accreditation journey? Once you get all of that information from all the members of your team, collate the responses, and try and align some of those so that you can provide and share the results with members of your team. So the best way to do that, and it depends on how your practice works, but think about sharing that at a meeting, putting a little post-it note on the board, in the lunchroom somewhere, anything you like. Just make sure that you involve everybody, ask everybody individually, and then share the results with your team. If you can define success as a team, then what you can do is get some buy-in from other members of your team. Along these same lines, when we talk about accreditation and engaging members of your team, it's really, really important to remember that we all have a unique perspective. Having your non-clinical and clinical teams involved in any major decisions are vital in the development of your policies, procedures, and systems that can take your practice to a situation where you're going to maintain compliance to the standards throughout the duration of the accreditation cycle. Your team, because they're operating at different levels and have different interactions within a system, your team are able to identify areas that can be a unique perspective and how effective the processes may be. It's important when you're considering the perspective of your team members to make sure that you are engaging and communicating with members of the team. So keep them in the loop. Talk to them early in the accreditation process and talk to them often. Keep checking in. Get their perspective on certain things within the standards, certain systems, certain policies, certain processes. Keep them in the loop. In terms of the culture of your practice, this is also something that if we had more time, we would talk about in a bit more detail, but have a think about what the culture of your practice actually looks like, and then how you might encourage a more transparent culture within the practice. Practices engaging their team members, and again, that could be through team meetings, educational sessions, training, social events, any sort of way that you engage with your team. Any provision of other opportunities for professional development, they should ideally be encouraging an environment of open discussion and a culture of transparency. It becomes very easy to live, in our own little bubble, doing our own little thing working within our own scope, and therefore we make decisions solely from our own experiences. But this is rarely the best approach for patients and for team morale. When you are open and communicate well and you have that transparent culture in your practice, you can really come to this team approach, this common understanding, and really develop some systems and policies and procedures in your practice that will hold you in good stead, provide you that vehicle of quality improvement, ongoing compliance to the standards, those sorts of things. That brings us to understanding who and how we should engage to become our advocates, our allies, our support network in your practice to engage your team for that successful accreditation journey. Every practice is different. Every practice is unique. They're not always structured the same way. There's not always the same decision makers. There's not always the same mix of staff. You may be located in Newcastle. You may be in, Barraba. It doesn't necessarily mean that the way you approach things in your practice is exactly the same as anybody else. Therefore, there really is no set structure on what or who you should engage and what is available to you in or what you should utilize in terms of resources and governance or outsourcing, however you approach accreditation, and the accreditation journey will be unique to you. What is important in that engagement is that you identify the leaders in your team. Your leaders don't necessarily have to be people in positions of authority. Your leaders don't necessarily have to be clinical team members. They can be non-clinical team members. Whoever is a leader in your practice plays a really important role in evaluating and monitoring your practice systems. Your leaders are engaged in the development of the systems. They're engaged in the monitoring and review of your systems. They're the people that will be able to help you bring everybody else on board in terms of engagement for the accreditation journey. Your leaders can be mentors, but they're not always, but they can be mentors to other staff and help them want to develop their own skill sets. But generally, they have an attitude and an approach that they're keen to share, they're keen to teach, they're keen to help you understand what you're doing, and they're keen to work together as a team towards the goals of the practice. So this is really critical. So you need to determine who are the leaders in your practice. And remember, they're not necessarily people in positions of authority. They just have that attitude, that approach, that mindset. So determine who they are. They're the people you need to get on board first. In determining how and who you should engage in the accreditation journey, it's really, really important to be realistic about the tasks and responsibilities you're allocating to certain team members. If you want to allocate any at all, that's also something important. You have to think about whether they're appropriate, whether they're the right people to have the responsibility for some part of the accreditation journey. So, is there any point in getting your podiatrist to come on board to look at the areas of cold chain management? Probably not. So have a think about who is really going to be the right person to allocate the tasks or responsibilities when you start talking about allocating resources and coordinating the implementation around accreditation and the journey of accreditation. Make sure that you think about whether they have the qualifications and experience to understand and proactively contribute to compliance within the practice systems. If you're looking at documentation, particularly if it's policy or procedures, have a look at whether you need more than one person to review that. So do you need different members of the team at different levels to have input into certain policies or certain procedures or certain systems that you've got in the practice? Can you harness a skill set of a particular team member to assist in the development of that system? What roles do your staff undertake, or what tasks do they undertake that they are champions of, that they can assist in the documentation and development of the policies and procedures and systems? So think about who's really good at what they're doing. Think about whether those behaviours are things that you want to implement or things that you want to support in terms of the accreditation journey. Ensure that you communicate your goals, tasks, and timelines effectively and obviously realistically. So make sure you take into consideration the current workload and the things that are happening for you within your practice. And you may need to change the goalposts, as we're getting very, very good at doing. Have a little huddle, have a little meeting, just to get together, just check in, or however you want to do that, but make sure you check in. Keep talking to the people that you've allocated tasks and responsibilities to, so you can make sure that they're on track. You can keep everybody in the loop. And again, you're going to start to develop that common understanding. You're going to start to develop that team approach, that open, transparent culture within your practice. If you can, try to identify any areas that team members are struggling with, particularly if you have allocated a task to somebody that you weren't sort of quite sure about. Make sure you check in, make sure you know what they're doing, and just make sure that they're on track, because at the end of the day, if you're responsible to coordinate accreditation for your practice, then that will come back to you. So make sure that you're checking in consistently and regularly. If you need to, reassign a task. Don't be frightened to do that, or get somebody else to help that person with that particular task. If you can, try and just jot down some notes. You don't have to have them as formal meetings, but if you can jot down notes, you've got a reference point. You can come back to those things. It can also help you with your action plan for the accreditation journey. Try not to waste time. You know, we can sit in meetings all day and never do anything. So try and be as efficient and organized as you can if you are doing those little huddles and meetings and things. But if you jot down notes, you'll make sure that you're not going to miss anything. If you need to, you can always adjust the timelines as well. So as well as reallocating the task, don't be frightened to adjust the timelines, but consider what your priorities are. So if you are looking at something like patient feedback, obviously you need to get that done in a timely manner. So prioritization of some of those tasks might be quite critical, and you may need oversight, and the people that you've assigned that responsibility to may need some assistance. So just remember that those timelines can be flexible, but consider what your priorities are. The key message that I want to share with you today is, whenever you're not sure about something in the standards, whenever you're not sure about something that is part of the accreditation process, is part of the accreditation journey, or you need some support and you don't know where to go to get it, please ask. There's such a lot of information out there, and it can be overwhelming how much information is out there in terms of resources and things like that. I guess from my perspective, and bear in mind I work for an accreditation agency, but from my perspective, your biggest resource is the standards document itself. Read and reread it, get somebody else to read it if you can't understand what that is specifically asking you to do. The challenge with the RICGP standards for General Practice 5th edition is that sometimes what we're actually looking for is not necessarily listed in the indicator statement. Remember to look at those you must and you could statements, but also there's a lot of information in the explanatory notes at the start of that particular criterion. So if you can't understand what the indicator statement is telling you, go back to the explanatory notes a page or two prior and just have a quick read through those. It might help you clarify things. Obviously, you can come to us for any of our resources, and we have a myriad of them. So please do use the things that we have available to you. We only do accreditation in the general practice space. So we have resources that are designed and purely targeted towards general practice. Your PHN can help you, and obviously a session like today is a huge help, but there are lots of other different resources that your PHN has, and you can reach out to Renee or to any of the practice support team in your PHN that will be able to help you as well. So don't think that they're not familiar with the requirements. They are. They talk to us all the time. We're doing things together often, and you know they're in lots of other practices within your PHN area. So please do reach out to them. One of the things we forget to do when we go through the accreditation journey is we forget to celebrate. We forget to say well done. We forget to thank members of our team and to really recognize the contribution that people have made within the practice. It's kind of hard. You get busy, you're doing stuff all the time, but one of the biggest messages that I want you to take out of today's session is that accreditation is a journey. It's not a race. It's not meant to be restrictive. It really is a journey. It's a journey of education. It's a journey of quality improvement. It's a journey for you to help you set those systems up in your practice that will ensure that you can maintain compliance against all the areas of the standards for the whole duration of the cycle. So and you know, one of the things that I say all the time is we don't want to help you get prepared for accreditation. That's not what our aim is. What our aim is to help you be prepared so that on any given day we can come into your practice, you can take a week off, you can have a holiday, and you will know that things are still working the way they should, that everybody understands their role, everybody understands why they do what they do, and that the practice will continue to meet those minimum benchmarks set under the RACGP standards. Accreditation really is a journey, but we want you to be prepared, not to get prepared. Give yourself and your team enough time when you are coming up to these key points within the accreditation program. So make sure that if you're doing your self-assessment, you give yourself enough time. So what do I mean by that? I mean, register early, register for your next round of accreditation, and we recommend that you do that 18 months prior to your on-site assessment. Make sure then you have those, and we have a resource around this. So if you are a QPA client, you can access this in our portal. We have some checklists, some timelines you can use. We have a tool that you can use to allocate responsibility for different things. There's lots of different things you can use, but give yourself time. Set aside a bit of time at the start when you first register to kind of then plan around what that looks like for you. The process of accreditation is really not designed to create a burden on practices. And I know some of you might feel that that's not the case at the moment, but what I would urge you to do is to take some of the things that we've talked about today and to try and put those in place so that it's not a burden for you individually, because we're exhausted, we're overloaded at the moment. Try and engage your team. Try and get as many people in your team as you possibly can to be part of this exercise. And you know, couch it in terms of it being a professional development activity or an opportunity for you know, ongoing education. Your practice team will thrive on your enthusiasm. If you're charged with leading accreditation in your practice, be enthusiastic about it, be positive about it. Remember that the slow and steady approach is always best. Don't leave everything to the last minute, but have the mindset or the attitude that accreditation and the accreditation journey is the opportunity for learning. It's an opportunity for you to have a collaborative approach, and just be enthusiastic, be positive about that whole journey that you're entering under. Create a system that is sustainable and consistent. So the accreditation journey is meant to be engaging and evolving. What it looks like for you this time round might look completely different next time round. You know, maybe we're through COVID, maybe there's, you know, a different sort of reality that we're living in the next round of accreditation. Many of your policy and procedures are going to remain static. They're not going to change, but as your environment changes, your approach to those might change. Continuing engagement will become second nature to all your staff. It's not, if you lead by example, it's not going to fall away instantly. The biggest thing for you is to celebrate those achievements, celebrate those accomplishments with your team. Even if you have a little earned it program and, you know, you bring a cupcake in or something, they don't have to be massive, big statements that you make. But what happens is when you celebrate those little things that your practice team members help you with along the accreditation journey, you will help to get everybody else's positivity around, you know, some of the tasks and responsibilities that you're assigning in terms of helping you with accreditation. But you'll also help to build that culture, help to build that teamwork and that approach towards accreditation. So do celebrate your accomplishments. Just some quick tips and tricks. Melissa's not giving me the hurry up. So look, there's lots of different things that I could talk to you about in terms of helping you engage all the members of your practice team, or as many as you can, to have a successful accreditation journey. These are just a few that I've put down. There's obviously lots of different things, but just apply these concepts, if you like, to different areas within your practice. Some might work, some might not, but be, you know, open to looking at what they look like. The biggest thing is don't try and do it all yourself. Seek out and use all the resources and things that you have available to you to help you through this process and through this accreditation journey. We've talked about the PHN. Use your accreditation agency. The college have lots of resources. So yeah, just use whatever you can. You need to understand which ones are applicable to your practice. So there's no point creating some massive, great big business plan when all you need in your solo GP practice is some business goals listed out. So just try and use resources that are relevant for you. So don't try and make a square peg fit into a round hole, but just really think about who you can reach out to, what you can use. Don't try and do it all yourself. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is just having that approach of, so the standards are designed for you to meet the intent, for you to be able to demonstrate in the way that you do what you do, how you meet the standards. But in order for you to do that, you need to understand what they're asking you and then think about what you're doing. So have a look at, you know, thinking outside the box. Think about a flexible approach. Be adaptable in some of the things that are, you know, being used or being talked about in terms of accreditation. Use that regular communication. If you don't, as I said, you don't have to have meetings, have a little huddle, have a, eat lunch together one day a week or one day a month, whatever it is. Just if you are going to use meetings, make sure that the documentation you have around those is going to be helpful to you. So if you're going to use them as evidence requirements for accreditation, then make sure that they specify all the things that you need to be able to demonstrate. So regular communication can be verbal, can be emails, you can use your F8 messaging, whatever you want to do in terms of communication, whatever works for you. You might have a handwritten book that sits, on the reception desk, but make sure that you're doing it regularly and you're keeping your team members in the loop. Have an approach towards training and ongoing development. Accreditation itself is a training and education journey, but plan for training and regular training and budget for it if you need to. Maintain your records that support training, and then, use whatever other documents or systems that you have available to you, whether that's Practice Hub or a spreadsheet for training logs, any of those sorts of things. I just want to quickly talk about some risk management things. So incidents and adverse events are often non-conformities. Start talking about incidents and adverse events from a risk management perspective. Have a think about, to try to encourage your team to think about an incident or an adverse event, because we don't often think about reporting adverse events or near misses if they're little. But those little things can help you build some really robust risk management processes in your practice. So try and have that discussion around that. Again, think about the evidence requirements for accreditation. What documents do I need to be able to demonstrate this? And then try and build those into your systems. Third-party engagement. So think about, in the accreditation journey, what you're going to need somebody else to do for you. So are you going to need to engage somebody to do the patient feedback surveys, for example? If you are, get on to that as soon as you can, so that you're not rushed trying to do patient feedback just before your on-site assessment. It'll place you under additional stress that you just don't need. Same with the maintenance of your equipment. So the calibration and your sterilizer and your validation, your vaccine fridges, all those sorts of things. So make sure that if you're getting people in, that you're organising that to give yourself plenty of time. If you are going to use external training providers, particularly for things like CPR, again, get organised early. And set yourself some calendar reminders. Get onto it as soon as you can. The last thing that I really want to say is about the accreditation program engagement. If you engage in the accreditation program, so the self-assessment, we know, and I've put on this slide here, we know, and this is a fact, and it's backed up by data, practices that actively engage in their self-assessment, that actively engage in the accreditation program, have far less non-conformities, so there's far less pressure. You don't have that concentrated big effort in terms of meeting the remedial action or the corrective action requirements to address non-conformities. Practices that are actively engaged in the accreditation program often see that as an opportunity to engage other members of their team, and everybody then has this view of accreditation being a quality improvement journey. In terms of QPA, we have a number of checklists and things to help you from our resources. We have a designated quality accreditation manager who can provide you tailored support for your practice. Please use them. They're standards trained, they're audit trained, they will help you. They'll be able to show you what resources we've got. They'll be able to point you in the right direction. use the program, the self-assessment program and the action plan that we provide to give you guidance in terms of anything else you need to make changes to in preparation for your on-site assessment. So try and tweak what you need to tweak before we get there to do that on-site assessment. That's pretty much me. Hopefully that has given you some insight into engaging your team members for a successful accreditation journey. So I'll hand back over to Melissa and just thank you very much everyone for having me.
Thanks so much, Michelle. We're just going to hand over now to Renee. She's got one slide of some upcoming accreditation events. Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Michelle, for that. That was fantastic. We have another couple of accreditation presentations coming up. The next one is the 23rd of June from 6:30 to 8:30. That's a HPMI presentation titled Accreditation Through the Eyes of Frontline Staff. And then we have another lunchtime mastermind session on Wednesday, the 10th of August, subject to be advised on that one. We'll see what's relevant at the time. If you need any accreditation support within your practice, reach out to myself or one of the other practice support officers. We can offer advice and support on meeting and understanding the RACGP accreditation standards. We have some templates and resources that you may find useful and can point you in the direction of where to find other resources. And we can assist in identifying quality improvement activities to support accreditation. So having a focus on quality improvement activities during accreditation encourages your practice to identify opportunities that will result in improved systems, processes and data. So if we can be of any help, just reach out to us. But I'll hand back over to Michelle for any questions that you guys may have. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to check the questions box. There hasn't been any that's come through so far, but if anyone has one, if you'd like to pop them in there, we've got a couple of minutes left. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to say thank you to Renee and Michelle. It was a great, really informative session. Always very popular, great numbers today, so online watching. Poll will pop up at the end of this session. If you could please complete that, just as a reminder, it only takes a couple of seconds and that data is very valuable to us. No questions coming through. So thank you, everyone. You've covered that topic so comprehensively that so far no questions. But if anyone has any that they think of after I close the session, you're more than welcome to send them through to education@thephn.com.au. Thanks everybody for your attendance today. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Renee. It was a great session and have a lovely afternoon, everyone. See you later. Bye.